before we get started, there's actually a video that's going to get started.
At the heart of every learning moment at Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, you will find our learners learning as they do in a variety of ways. Some of the most effective learning happens on the job, with employees improvising new ways to work that peers then adopt. Where success leads, teams follow, departments follow, and organizations follow. Before you know it, a light bulb moment has morphed into a best practice. In addition to actively enabling and facilitating such on-the-job learning and knowledge sharing, we provide healthy doses of formal, dedicated learning. All of these paths blend together to meet the learning needs of the new workforce. This idea formed the foundation of our learning strategy. A dynamic, geographically dispersed workforce and ever-evolving technology further powers this vision. What resulted was Bloom, a technology that empowers our learners like never before. Bloom connects the breadth and depth of our workforce on a single platform. It is an enterprise-wide platform in the truest sense of the term. Bloom aggregates user-generated content in the form of short videos, which are available for viewing anytime to anyone in the organization. It's our own version of TED, lynda.com, or YouTube. Using Bloom, our learners are able to learn not just from their peers, but also directly from our leaders. The central idea is to tap into our employees' micro-moments and further translate them into micro-learning, with the collective intelligence of our organization fueling the whole process. So how has Bloom helped us push forward with our learning strategy? Most importantly, it has helped the learning function deliver solid business value by increasing productivity of our workforce and boosting the efficiency of our own function. It has helped us break down silos and make knowledge available throughout the enterprise. It has fueled employee partnerships through collaborative content creation efforts. It has helped us unlock a rich and previously untapped source of knowledge, the experience of a passionate and committed workforce. And finally, Bloom has given us another way to enhance employee engagement by making learning user-centric, community-driven, and social.
Okay. So I'm Adri Maisonet. I'm the Vice President for Enterprise Learning and Development with Blue Cross North Carolina, and it is wonderful to be here. Much like we've heard from the other speakers, we definitely had a need for micro-learning and video-based learning in our organization. Our agenda was just a little bit different, however. So how many of you know a little thing about healthcare reform? Yeah. So as you can imagine, my life has been a little frenetic for the past several years as we've been trying to figure out how best to accommodate all the transformation that was necessary in our organization to keep pace with the changes in the healthcare landscape. So as we started really thinking through what do we need to deliver to our organization, how do we change the positioning of our learning function to really stay ahead of this change, we started listening very differently to the new people coming into the organization. And a lot of them were saying things like, what do you mean I have to come to class? What do you mean it's not on my phone? I don't have time for this. So we started looking and thinking about, why should people learn differently from how they do every day and every moment with how they have to learn when they come into the workplace? So the thought of Bloom was then born. So the first truth for us, and I'm sure that some of you can relate to this, is that one size does not fit all. We knew that going in. One size never has fit all. And our programs were very sophisticated. We have a lot of investment through our organization where we were able to blend most of our solutions. But what we weren't doing very well was integrating the video component of it. And again, our audience kept growing, the demand kept changing, and we had to figure out a different way to be able to address this new demographic in a way that allowed the business to maximize productivity and increase efficiencies. The second truth for us is that we started to realize that organizationally, people were driven to distraction. And because they were driven to distraction, when they did come to the classroom or when they did consume learning in other mediums, by the time they got back to the business within a week, that knowledge had atrophied. Things were starting to die on the vine. So we had to figure out, okay, how do we solve for this and solve for it in a way that when learners do leave our solution, be it classroom or another way, they're able to apply it and continue to build on it and learn from it. The final thing I think that we learned is that the lines of learning have blurred, right? So these micro moments were happening all around us. People were picking up their phone if they had a thought, and they were doing a search to get exactly what they needed in that moment. The question then became for us, why can't they do the same thing with what we need them to learn here at work? So as the lines started blurring, we started to realize there's a real opportunity here for us. How do we get on board with this? How do we take advantage of it? So we identified several different vendors that were offering a variety of video-based platforms, and we partnered with an organization called Kaltura. Kaltura was great for us because they offered exactly what we needed by virtue of the platform, but it was going to allow us to configure and brand this tool the way that we needed it to be branded and configured. So what we were trying to set out to do was to create something that was going to be YouTube-esque, Khan-esque, TED-esque, a little of these different esques, and put Blue Cross in the center of it, allowing us, number one, to integrate our leaders into the process, so we're bridging that gap with our leaders and our learners, and then allowing the learners to get in the driver's seat very, very differently. So rather than all the learning being about what Audrey or somebody from the learning organization pushed to their plan or told them that they had to do, they now began to own the learning very differently and wanted to share in the content development. So with this tool, it allowed us to take real advantage of those micro moments and turn them into micro-learning. So with Bloom, it's populated with several different channels, all of which are video-based that go around 3 minutes max. We have lots of analytics that tells us what's working, what's not working, what users are liking, what they're not liking, and it's very transparent. So just like you would see with YouTube or some of the other social tools out there, people can like it, they can not like it, they can leave all kind of comments, and we use that information to be able to grow what we're doing. Bloom has also allowed us to bridge the gap between our formal and our informal learning by integrating the video into that, and it allows us to bridge when they're at work versus when they're not at work, so learning really does happen 24/7. The beauty for the organization is, again, we were driven so much to distraction with so much that was happening every day, it now gave people that opportunity to just kind of take a step back and breathe and learn whenever and however they wanted to. So what was interesting about Bloom is that this was not a budgeted initiative. So when the thought came about, of course, I'm working with my team and we're thinking through, how do we get something like this up and running? This is not something that can wait until the next budget cycle. We need to make this happen now. So we knew that it was going to be about a $60,000 investment to get it started. So what we did was we invited different people across the organization to come in and just kind of learn a little bit about what we were trying to accomplish. Instead of selling the technology, we sold the possibilities. And by selling the possibilities, people started to realize you can do a whole lot more with the learning platform that we're going to use for video to drive communication, to drive awareness, to drive engagement, etc. And so we had enterprise buy-in very, very quickly. And what was intended to be just a learning swim lane turned into an enterprise-wide platform that basically is embedded into our culture today as one of our primary systems. So what does Bloom allow us to do? Number one, it allows us to address the on-demand learning. So with Bloom, we have literally, in some instances, been able to retire entire programs that may have been a couple of days, and in some instances, a couple of weeks long, and reduce that down to several days, several hours, and in some cases, several minutes. It allows the learner to basically pick and choose exactly what they need in that moment to get exactly what they need to perform that particular task. It's also allowed learners and leaders to come together very differently, to have conversations about what they're needing in their particular areas outside of what the learning function provides, and user-generate content that's very specific to their respective areas. This allows us to generate and create very, very differently. So as I mentioned earlier, the role of the learning function is continuing to evolve. And what we've realized is that we can no longer be the controllers of the learning that happens in the organization. We really need to be more of the facilitators, the enablers, very, very different. And so with that, it required that we partner and collaborate with the organization very differently and sharing this process of curation. And then finally, again, the rating. So very, very transparent. So this was a cultural shift for us, right? So as you put your content out there, you're kind of exposing yourself and just hoping that everyone's going to like what you have to say. But it turned out to be very powerful because you got a lot of constructive feedback about whether or not whatever it is that you put on the site actually met the need. And if it didn't meet the need, they were giving you feedback on how to correct it very quickly. The other thing that we found is that it would allow people to build off of it. So we've got series now that have populated, like for an example, our leadership channel, where someone may go out there and do a leadership session on coaching, for an example. A very simple video on coaching turned into a whole series on what it looks like when it's done very well versus what it looks like when it's not done very well. And we've stratified that across all the different levels of leadership, and it's actually one of our more popular channels. So what are the results? The first thing I would say is definitely curiosity, and that's really important for us. So we've been very deliberate about trying to foster a learning culture in our organization, and I think part of having a learning culture means that you've got to have curious learners. Learners need to want to learn. They need to be curious about what's going on in the organization, how to expand their knowledge. In our case, for an example, as our landscape continues to change, our skills have to change. The roles are changing. So a number of things that were bedrock for us in the past ended up getting commoditized. So now we have learners that on their own time will go out there and learn from Bloom, and as it's integrated with our other tools, bring up their skill sets in a way that continues to render them marketable. The other thing that it's done is it's rendered a level of accountability that we didn't have before. So with accountability, as I said, we have several different channels that are in Bloom. We're able to see who goes out there, who's taking what, how long they're taking it, what level of interaction they had, et cetera, and they're in the driver's seat. So no longer am I saying you have to come to class at 3 o'clock and take this training now. I'm saying you've got 1 week to do it, and no one's going to babysit you. And so the tool now helps us to have that level of accountability that's pushed back to the learner. And then there's a higher level of engagement. So we just completed our corporate engagement survey, and one of the components that came out very high was the level of learning opportunities in our organization. So with Bloom, again, much like they can do when they're in their personal time, now being able to just go out there and do a search when they have a need in that moment has shifted that paradigm and has put them in a place where they feel like they have much more control over the learning and over the problems that they're facing every day, which has increased the level of engagement. And to be in a position where they feel like, I have something important to say or something to share with the organization, so now I've got a tool where I can go out there and I can load up information and share it with the organization. And then finally, performance improvement. So again, for courses that we once upon a time had to deliver either some form of e-learning or through ILT, we've actually integrated with this tool and set very specific goals that are tied to performance outcomes. So the system does allow us to do assessments pre and post. It does allow us to reward through badging. We can do all sorts of things. But what we have seen is that people that do consume a lot of the information that's available to them through Bloom, their performance in very specific areas have increased. So for us, Bloom has been wonderful, and it continues to bloom, and we will continue to drive it as a platform of the future state for us. So thank you very much.